TESOL presents Free Friday webinars every Friday, and you can bring a friend. You can get a certificate of attendance, and they're absolutely free, so they're fantastic. And then afterwards, we do have recordings. So if this is your first time, you can access the other recordings, and I'll give you the link to that. They're all in video form. And the link to that is the American TESOL Cafe. And you can see the last one we did, we had global projects and we did toddlers. And then the next time we will be presenting today we're going to present about motivating teens. And I want to start off by saying, what are some of the problems with teen motivation that you find? I know some of the teen motivation problems that I have encountered in the past is many of the teens want to speak their own language and will, especially if it's a monolingual class. And by monolingual, I mean that pretty much all your students speak one language. So for example, if you teach in Spain, then all the teachers are going all the students are going to speak in Spanish. And so that's one of the biggest struggles, is getting the teenagers to begin to use the English. And by motivation, that means that we don't necessarily punish them or anything, but we encourage them. They want to be able to engage in the language. So why do you believe that teenagers have a hard time in their English classes? Can anybody think of why you think teenagers who aren't motivated, what the problem stems from? Okay, maybe they just don't care. One of the reasons behind it that people have found when they've asked is they do want to communicate, exactly, but many times they're forced to take English. Hello. So when they're forced to take English, especially from their parents, then they don't see the point in taking something they're forced to do. So one of the things that we have to do is to connect it to the why. We have to share with them the why. Why is it important to learn English? And to how it may interest them. So what are some of the things that we can teach them that would motivate them to learn English? One of the things I found was music. Music is one of the most popular things in pop culture. They really seem to, my students, when I've taught teenagers, have really responded to sharing different music with each other, and not necessarily, yes, they like English music. American music is very very important in a lot of places. Students really listen to different American music and things like that. But most of all, teens, they just love music and they can share their music with each other. So a lot of things, the big question is what gets them motivated. And when we begin to connect this to their the reason to learn English, then we really begin to get them to want to learn in a dynamic way. But one of the things that we have to do is we have to rethink the way they learn. And one of the reasons I really like Paul Maglioni's presentation, which I believe let me see, shared with you the link, is he talks about the brain, and he talks about how teenagers, they're motivated by different things, and their brains are actually quite different than ours. They seem to need a lot of stimulation. They're used to moving around. They're used to being on mobile phones. They're used to listening to MP3 players. They're used to all this moving and playing video games. And when we think about the way that they learn at home, then we can incorporate this in the classroom and change the way they learn. One of the theories that comes out is from Mark Prensky, and he talks about digital natives and digital immigrants. And I'm sure some of you have heard about the Mark Prinsky. And I'm not sure if you, okay, so then let me tell you about it. So if you haven't heard about it, Mark Prinsky says he has a theory, and it's a very famous theory. It's called the digital natives and digital immigrants. A digital native is somebody who grew up with the cell phones, with the internet. So you and I are not digital immigrants. We're digital natives. We're digital immigrants. What that means is that in our lifetime, we were able to see the growth of the internet. So you remember that how life was before the internet. You remember how it was when we had these big cell phones and we didn't have things like iPhones. Um, and so many of the technologies that we have today, the World Wide Web, social networks, all of this, we didn't grow up with, so we know the before. But then we learned it, and then some of us are very high tech. In other words, we can use Twitter, we can use Facebook, we can use some very sophisticated technology. We can use iPhones, iPads, Kindles, different types of technologies. But the students that we have today, many of them, especially teens and adolescents, they grew up with the internet. They don't know what life was because of the internet. And that's a really good point that you're pointing out, because that it also depends on the country and the region. Because depending on your country, some of you will have access, and your teenagers will have access to different technologies, and some of you won't. It'll be easier, or it'll be, for example, in India, they have a lot of learning that they do through cell phones. And the reason they do it through cell phones is because a lot of people have that. But they don't necessarily have computers. Yes, there is a definite gap. So what that means is that something doesn't necessarily come natural to us. We have to take a while to learn it. For example, I have books that I have on here, that on my iPhone. I can't read the books on there. It's very hard and difficult for me to do this and to concentrate. But many of our students are very used to reading online. They can read in their little iPhones or Kindles or e-readers, or on the computer they can read e-books, and it doesn't do the same. It doesn't give them a headache. They're very used to it. I gave my 4-year-old nephew my iPhone, and he figured out very quickly how to do different types of technologies and things like that. So some of us will get very comfortable with technology. I'm very comfortable with technology, but others of us, it's very new. So for the teacher who it's really new for, then there's gap from the teenagers and how they learn. So learning for them is much different than learning was for us, because we didn't have these technologies. But the students, they're used to this type of learning. And it's very interactive, and it's constantly getting them to input ideas. They contribute a lot. And many of our students may already be digital publishers. They may already be on using separate tools. So here are a bunch of Web 2.0 tools. So many of us, even when we learned the internet, we didn't get to, when you first, if you remember back when the internet came about and you saw web pages, you usually just read information, or you saw animated GIFs and stuff, but you didn't get to contribute. But now you have Web 2.0, and part of Web 2.0 is that you get to contribute. So for example, you can get on Twitter, and I will talk to you, and you will talk back to me. But it used to not be that way. You didn't have blogs. You couldn't comment on a website. You could just look at it. But the students today are very used to being able to participate on websites. And these are many of the great tools that you can use with your teenagers to get them to participate online. So I really think technology is one way that you really help motivate teenagers, because this is the way many of them are used to learning. They're used to being contributors and they're used to participating online. But even if they're not, imagine you have a story idea, okay? And you want your students to make a story. And this is a good activity anyway, to have teenagers write stories for their younger siblings or for a younger class and then read those stories later to that class. So this is always a good activity. The kids love it, and they really like being able to read these stories to the children. But one of the things is, um, if they publish it online, then they can have this story that they created open to their grandparents, their parents. Everybody can see this story. They can get comments from around the world. And because it's online, they can even share it with other classes around the world. Then they don't have to only read to the class that's down the hallway or in their school or their brother or sister, but this book all of a sudden is presented to the world. So for teenagers, this is really exciting. They get very motivated by this and they want to keep doing things. So Web 2.0 tools are really, 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 I think that it's not necessarily the technology, it's getting them comfortable to be publishers online. And this is really a great idea anyway, because when they grow up, when they become adults and they start working, they're going to have to collaborate, and they're going to have to collaborate on technology. Technology is very much a part of our lives. So this is something they're going to do. I mean, if we think of most of the careers, a lot of countries have global companies, and they do a lot of online work. They communicate online. They do video conferencing. They do email. So it's good to get them to practice right now for their jobs. And you can do that with global collaboration projects and things like that. So some of these you may notice and some of them you may not, but that's okay because I'll show you some of them online in a little bit. But before we do this, you might want to think about the hardware to get your class set up. So we think of the hardware. And these are some of the tools that you can have. You can have a little microphone, and this will really help with podcasting. I have my MacBook, and my MacBook does everything. I don't even need a microphone because, like I'm talking to you right now on a webcam, all of this is in my Mac. But if you don't, that's okay. A digital camera is very good because they can have videos and pictures, and students love making videos. They really, really, really love making videos. And you can do a lot through a phone. It doesn't have to be a smartphone. So the technologies that I have in my class, I used to teach about 70 high school students from 20 different nations. And it was from beginner level to very, very high level. And they were from the age of 14 to 19. And so we always had ways to interact. And one of the things that students really loved to do was create movies. They love creating. And so what would do is each of them, they already had their cell phones. And in their cell phones, they could make videos and music and things like that. And take snapshots and record. And I would put them in groups, and I would give them a theme. So for example, one of them was to analyze a commercial. They had to analyze an advertisement, and they could look on YouTube or anywhere to get this advertisement. And they had to say what was wrong with the advertisement. So for example, they would have to say, did it give a bad impression of women? Did it give a bad impression of a culture? Did it give a bad impression of men? Did it just do false advertising? Was it a lie? And then they would have to remake this commercial and fix that problem. So if it was against women, then they had to remake this. And they loved this activity. They would get together, and they made some of the best advertisements I had ever seen. And they also wrote papers about it, and then they presented this to the rest of the class. And everybody really loved this project. But one of the things they did, and this was before I started having them do this online on the internet, because on the internet it's even much easier. But we used to use a lot of free software that was already in the computer. And because they already recorded this, if they are using their digital cameras and they're taking little movies and pictures and they're getting all of this together, then they can use, they don't have to be online to do that. They can already have that just uploaded to the computer. And then depending what you have, if you have a PC, so if you have Windows, then these are some of the free tools that you can use. One of them is Audacity. That's the one with the headphones that I have there. Audacity you download for free, and let me go ahead and give you the link to that. And Audacity lets them record audio. They can make podcasts. They can. There's so many uh, ways that they can edit the audio. Um, and so this is one really great tool that you can download on a computer. Now, I only had one computer, well, actually two computers in my class of 30. And we used to be able to still do the videos, and we would just take different times that the students could work on it. So sometimes I would assign the project at the beginning of the week, and then by the next week is when the presentations would come about. And every day a different group at different time frames could use the computer. So these are some of the things. Windows Movie Maker, that's in a lot of computers already, and Windows Movie Maker is fantastic. And you can do a lot of editing with Paint if it's a PC. Now if it's a Mac, which I love Macs, Macs are fantastic for this kind of video project and digital storytelling. So one of the things you can do with the Mac is you have iMovie, which is a lot like Windows Media. You have GarageBand, and GarageBand even comes with sounds with different kinds of background noises and things. So it's really fantastic. And then you have iPhoto, which makes it really easy. That's a good question, Linux. I think that you can download Audacity for Linux. So I'm talking a lot about group projects. And one thing about teenagers is they're very social. They love to, for video editing. Oh, that's a good question. I'll put some links in a little bit for video editing that I have on the wiki. There's a whole bunch of them that I have, and then you can uh, and then you can use any of those. There's a J-Cut. You can download a bunch of them. Camtasia, I think even in Gene, but it does like 5 minutes. So there's a lot of different ones that you can download. So in this kind of a setup, so you see these boys and they're working on a project, and you really have to set the classroom up for this. But I find that teens are really motivated when they have to work with somebody else. Teens really love to do different things like collaborate with each other, but it takes a little help. And when you have these group tasks, one of the things that you do in your role is you act as a facilitator. So while they're each doing their projects, you're walking around, you're asking questions, you're making sure they get along, because they're not always going to get along. And you make sure everybody's contributing and doing their part. And then also, it's really good when you act as a facilitator and go around, because one of the things you can do is when they begin to stop, when they're not speaking in English, then you can start asking them questions in English, and you can steer them in a positive direction to begin using the English and start asking about the project and stuff. So this is, I really believe in group tasks and setting up the classroom for this. I think teenagers should be connecting, collaborating, and communicating constantly in the classroom. What happens is that most teens are not used to sitting there and receiving a lot of information. Instead, they're really used to being able to provide. Many of them are on social networks, and we'll talk about that as well, what all that means. But they're used to talking with their friends on a daily basis, either through text messaging. If you observe a teenager for a day, and you, even if you have your own teenagers, and this is always a good exercise at the beginning of the year, have them write what they do what is their daily routine? That's always a good theme anyway when you're teaching English, are themes and routines. So ask them what they do and find out how they're already learning, because then you find out a lot about how the students learn and what they're motivated by. So if a student is constantly playing video games, then you know that this is the way that your teenagers are learning best. If they're text messaging their friends, if they're on Facebook, if they're on MySpace or whatever the social network is, then you'll be able to figure out their habits, and then you can incorporate that into learning English. So one of the things we talked about, the digital native versus the digital immigrant theory. And so I want you to think about some of your personal observations of whether you agree with this, the digital natives and digital immigrants. And if you have any stories that you would like to share about digital immigrants and digital natives, then you're more than welcome to take the mic and talk. Everyone should have, let's see. Okay, so everyone has a mic, so if anyone would like to contribute, then you have to. Okay, so that's definitely a good point. Um, that age doesn't have to do anything with the immigrant native debate. Dislike stereotype. Okay. But I do think, one of the things about Prensky that I think is really great is he came up with this theory. And even though there are holes in this theory, because I do believe there's some people that are just technically inclined or really get technology. So for example, for my generation, okay, so maybe perhaps we weren't so advanced in technology. But one of the things we did do was there are some of us that were already developing our own languages and programming and web design. And so some of us have a very sophisticated knowledge of technology, even more so than many of our students. So I understand the age, um, I totally understand the age thing. But what Prensky gets us to do is to begin seeing how technology is now a part of our lives. It's already integrated, and it's already a part of many of our students' lives. So it's something that they encounter every single day, and it's something that they learn with and have the opportunity to learn with. And even if it's not in their home, even if your students don't have a computer at the home, they usually will have at least a TV, they'll have a video game set, they'll have a cell phone that they use. It's very rare that that our students have no technology whatsoever, or they will not encounter it. This is very, very, very rare. There are some parts in the world where this is true, but there's usually some kind of technology, and I think Prensky makes us really look at this in the way that it impacts learning. So here are a few sites that are really good for teenagers that you can find some fantastic ideas. So I talked about Paul Maglione earlier and how Paul has done a lot of research with teenagers and their sleep patterns and then the way.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, Shelly. Okay, very good. I totally agree with you on what you said, and I really would like to help my students in incorporating technology in my classroom. But the problem is they're lazy. They are so lazy in, for example, setting a blog for themselves or recording something. If I requested from them to do it as a podcast or to do something related to technology. And we do the normal things in classroom, like paperwork activities, presentations, and all of this. And I have also something which is, I'm starting a new project which is sponsored by the American Embassy in Egypt. And those students are not forced to come here. Yes, they are not forced to come to the classroom, but they are supposed to be the best ones. But I'm having trouble that they do not want to work that much hard because this program is for 2 years. So 2 years of learning English, and they are all of them for teenagers. So I'm having really trouble in encouraging them and doing my best with them. And they all speak English, but the problem is I want to not to educate them, but not only the language itself. So something from here, something from there. Your opinion, for example, in Egypt's revolution.
No, this is a great question. And actually, one of the most motivating things that I think worked for me, and I don't know if you tried this already. I mean, it's great that they're doing all this stuff, but one of the things is global collaboration projects. There, Nikki Hockley and Gavin Duni do this presentation, and they show how there's these Brazilian students, and they interact with these Italian students, and they end up making these videos um, on Devolver. And in part of the Devolver, oh, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Oh, okay, good. And so one of the things that they show is the students, they had to make a video and they had to share something about their culture as far as the music goes. Um, and they didn't share. Okay, so somebody said earlier that sometimes there's a problem because it's not English music. Well, they don't necessarily have to do that. My students, I had some from Chihuahua, Mexico, and then I had some from Japan, and then I had some from Korea and Taiwan and Russia, and they were all in one class. And what we would do is they already had their MP3 players, and um, even if it was in their own language, they would explain it in English, what the word said, what kind of music was it. Sometimes they would dance. We would love it because my students from Mexico, they would dance the reggaeton. So they would share with the reggaeton, and then they would end up dancing. And we would have this constant every Friday where they would share something, a particular theme about their culture. But students really love doing that. So they can connect with another class across the world. And you say something like, okay, we're going to share our culture and we're going to share it in English, then I think that's one way to motivate them. So I really believe in getting a class collaboration project going. Also, this website right here, well, it depends what you decide to do. One of them is the Globsters of the World. That's a really good project. Um, Let me go ahead and give you this wiki. And they make an interactive um, poster of their culture, and then they can submit it to others. You can go on Twitter, and then on Twitter you can ask different schools, hey, I have a class in, especially with Egypt, there's so many students worldwide, and yeah, you have to think of the time zone and things like that. Maybe the UK might be a better place than the America or something like that. But with Egypt, they would really want to ask the questions like, what is going on? Can you show us, you can have Skype conversations, you can do interactive movies, you can share their voice thread. So there's some, yes, those are great ideas, Sue. Sue said, okay, so Sue said, I got some of my teen students to search for music for their culture on YouTube, translate the lyrics for other learners, and tell stories behind the songs. I think that's fantastic. That's a great idea. But when you get them teaching others, then they tend to get motivated, and they're not as lazy when they have to. teach somebody else. So I think that's one good way. Now, look, English Attack might give you some good ways too, because the thing, this is a free site, and Paul, what he does on his site is he gives you topics that he found that teenagers really, really enjoy. So let me get you, and you can sign up. It's free for teachers, I believe, still, because it's in beta. And also sometimes bringing in one of the teachers, Greta Sandler, what she did in her class, she got on the blog, and then they really like blogging. But one of the things she does is every Friday they have singing karaoke Friday. And so the students have to pick English songs, and then they sing these English songs. They learn them, they learn the lyrics and things like that. And as a class, they do this kind of singing Fridays. So if you have special days for them, where every Friday or every Monday or something, it's like a theme and it's something really cool. I used to get my students to bring in, oh, there's no sound? Um, One of the things they used to do is they used to bring in food, and they would share the food from their different cultures, and then we would have a big food day, and we'd sit around and we would eat the food. And it was really fantastic. I mean, they loved that, and you would find out a lot about the different cultures and things like that. Or even if it's the same culture, they would share their favorite recipe, and then they would talk about that their parents made, and they would talk about the when they had this meal, why it's such a great meal, and things like that. So I think when we begin to have like special days and events and things like that, that the kids really, really enjoy that. And if they're able to bring something in the classroom, then that's very good. The English Attack site has a lot of different great um, topics and themes and quizzes, and very interactive. So you can try it out with some of the students and see if that's very motivating for them. It's a good way to do it. Another way is ELT Digital Play, which has a lot of game sites. I have seen people bring in video consoles like PlayStation, Guitar Hero, and have the students play this as a class, and the students love it. Once a week, they get to play Guitar Hero, or they get to play Sing It or something, and they get to use the English because they're singing songs, and um, they're learning the English behind it, and you can do activities with it. So I think games are a great way. Another way is social media. We can use the tools that we learn with every day, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, we can incorporate these in the class. I have seen some fantastic Facebook groups with teenagers, and the teenagers love Facebook because they're already on it. So there's a lot of things that you can use, and I have a bunch of bookmarks. So let me see if I can get you the bookmarks on using Facebook with students. So you're able to really tell the different types of things that you can do with that. Let's see, let me get the Facebook and education. They're doing some exciting things, especially with English language learners. And because social media, you have to have the language. So that's some of the ways that you can use Facebook, or any type of social network, whatever is the popular one that's similar to Facebook in your country. You have to, exactly, so we might as well use it for speaking English. These are called personal learning environments. And they're so fantastic because they're social. They get to meet other kids around the world. And for many teenagers, that's very motivating to be able to connect with another teenager worldwide. So they get to share pictures, they get to share videos. That's a fantastic idea. Okay, so Ola says, what about creating pages for some famous characters in history? That's fantastic. That's a great idea. I thought I saw some, and maybe it was you who told me that there were some that did like Jane Eyre and some other famous literature characters, what their Facebook page would be like, and then they ended up putting different pictures from the past and stuff like that. So that's a great idea. That's really great. Um, but social networks are a great way for students to learn. We have to get the permission from the parents, but once you do that, I mean, it's a great place. One of the ones that I have on there is Second Life. And Second Life has recently opened up to 16-year-olds, as like, oh, well, maybe it's 17-year-olds. So you have to get permission for it. But Second Life is fantastic. They can travel to another world. And often that world has been created exactly in the same way. So for example, you can go to Venice, you can take your students to Venice, and then you can have conversations where the students separate and they talk about where they visited in Venice. And these are digital, yes, exactly, for the ELT digital playbook. Thank you for adding that. But these are really important, and these are great ways that students get to interact with the world. Mobile learning. So this is another technology that's really great for students. Photobabble is fantastic. It's so easy to do. Even AudioBoo, Story, all of these are digital storytelling types of apps. One of them is a game. Wordsmith is a game, and I really like Wordsmith. Wordsmith is for advanced learners, but it's a lot like Scrabble. And the kids can chat, though, while they play. So these are some great apps that you can use with the students. If they have their own phones, you can suggest it. And what they do is they can create digital stories with this. For example, let me find Photobabble for you. And Photobabble, I mean, it's so simple. You choose a photo. So I can choose any type of photo I want. And actually, I was out in the digital technologies um, today. So I can choose this picture. That's me tweeting. It's this fantastic thing. And then all I do is press record at the bottom. It's so simple. So I chose a picture that I already took, or I can take a picture. I press record, and now I'm talking. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And then I touch the screen to stop, and then I just press play. Now, this is a free app. And then what I do is I share this online, and it comes out to everybody in the world. That was so fast to do. So it's something that each of your teenagers, you can incorporate so much. They can talk about their family. They can talk about their pets. They can talk about their favorite music. You can teach grammar structures this way. So this is a great tool for that. Mind blowing, it's a mind map. So what they can do is the same thing. They have video, they have audio, and they do it under a theme, and it comes out as a mind map. So these are really great things that they can do. Now, a lot of this talk has been about technology, and I understand that maybe we don't necessarily have online technologies. Maybe we don't have access to mobile apps, but we can always bring some kind of technology in the classroom. So for some of my students, we weren't online when I first started teaching teenagers. But even if I couldn't get them to blog, one of the things I did get them to do was to do group projects together. And I also got them to do stuff like journaling. And for my students, it was very motivating to have them for every time they walked in the classroom, they got their journals, and they could decorate the journals any way they want. And this was not graded. It was a participation grade. And each day I asked them a question. I had 100 different topics. And every Friday they could write about their day, just anything within the week, anything they struggled with. It was free writing. They could write about their families. And this was only for them and for me. I would look through them and then I would get to know a lot about my students. And it was really helpful for their motivation. But they knew they had 10 minutes every single class to do that. It wasn't always writing with, well, sometimes they had topics. Like, for example, I would say, if you were in charge of the world, then what would you, if you were in charge of the country, then what kind of law would you pass if you could pass any, and why? If you had one wish, then what would be your wish and why? Or would say something like, create a comic of something funny, or so exactly these free, but I had it as free writing, and this way they could express a lot, and only I saw it, and it was a participation grade, but I could also see some of the grammar structures and stuff that they would constantly struggle with. I wouldn't grade it, but for me and for them it was a kind of way of communicating. So then I would write notes in and say, oh, that's very interesting that you say this about the world, or wow, that's really interesting that you would choose this law. Um, yes, and well, I collect them at the end of the week, so that if they didn't have enough time, because they were, I would try to get them to do at least a page. So if they didn't have enough time, then just every week they turned them in, and then I would go and I would look at them. So it doesn't always have to be technology. I think technology is really great because they're going to have to use it in their careers anyway. It's very motivating. They become publishers. You can have global collaboration projects and things like that, but it doesn't have to do that. Um, I have a lot of homework. I have the students grade and do a lot of peer editing themselves, so I don't necessarily do a lot of all the grading myself. um, yeah, okay, that's a great idea. Um, have them during a break email them to you. I mean, so there's different ways that you can get students to do motivating things. If you can use the technology, even better. You can get them to create videos. That is one thing that has really worked. I have seen so many teenagers, class, that when they begin making a video, all of a sudden you give them a camera and you tell them, here, go make a small 5-minute movie of your world. It could be an interview, it could be, you could put a topic, you can give them guidelines, you can give them rubrics, you can give them checklists, but have them do it in groups. And they love video making. They just really love video making. You don't even have to put it online. There are a lot of the ones that I can't do, but definitely you can do this. So thank you for coming today. It's kind of late. We went a little over. And if you need anything, then you can always email me. And thank you for coming to this presentation. And my email is, that's my wiki. You can find all sorts of activities on this one. And let me put that. And thank you so much, Ola, for coming on and asking the questions. Hi, Cecilia. Yes, we're just ending. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.